Hi, everyone. So, thank you so much for everybody jumping in. It's early morning ish to me. Please drop into chat where you are coming from today. Where are you hailing from? Is it early morning for you, or is it a little later in the day? I've already done a call already where we were talking about some very interesting things, but I am here and we are focused. This is 100% live. So if you have questions, drop them into chat because once again, this is a live webinar. It's not pre-recorded. We are going to talk through some of the really fascinating things that I think have been happening around networking and especially around introversion for this year that feels especially difficult. So, we're going to jump right in. So, this session is the introvert's guide to getting booked networking without draining your battery. A very important subject because I am an introvert. I know so many people on this call are introverts or allies of introverts. And it is so tiring to be out there pounding the pavement, especially when it's at a physical conference, etc. But let's start with some definitions. So let's start with what networking actually is. Okay. So, I'm going to start super simple and say to me, because networking is a little bit of a dirty word sometimes. We don't always like hearing the word networking because it becomes already overwhelming just to hear that word in general. So to me, networking is meeting the people who can potentially up level your career, right? They might be able to open a door. They might be able to introduce you to someone, or perhaps they themselves are connected to an opportunity. I recently met someone and I thought we were going to connect because we were going to talk about an opportunity they had in house. However, they said, you know what, we actually have something that is with one of our partners and we'd love to connect you with that. So you never know when you connect with someone for a business connection, for networking, where that might lead to. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you to so many people chiming in. Of course, Shelby helping run this. Hunter, Jury, Ellen, Atul, Mohammed. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in once again. Feel free to drop into chat where you're coming from. And also, I love to hear if you are an introvert, drop that into chat too. Okay, so let's get back to defining networking to start. So I like to think of it also as you are not out there in the very traditional sense of collecting a billion business cards or working the room. Because once again, in this day and age, when we have so much noise, collecting a stack of 100 business cards at a convention may not be the main way that you get that next door opening. And instead, I want you to start thinking about it as networking is building relationships, right? We're going to start by slowly building our relationships one conversation at a time. Hello, Lakshmi. Yes, Shelby, you're absolutely allowed to be here. And I see Ellen just said, I think networking is also just interactions around certain topics, purposes, industries, business, or career driven. Yes, and that's what we're going to focus on today. And I am going to say something that hopefully is a little bit more reassuring, which is you do not need a million followers or a million contacts or connections. You need a few of the right connections. So I want you to start thinking also about goals. One exercise I recently did at VidCon with a group full of, I think it was 100 people, maybe 110 people in a room, is we literally broke out a piece of paper, scissors, glue sticks, very grade school. And I did this with a room full of adults. And we mapped out what do we look like right now in our career? And what do we look like 6 months from now? So I encourage you to, if you are a very tactile, hands on person, to try doing this exercise. Get out a piece of paper, fold it in half, and in one side, write or draw out who you are right now. And then who do you want to be in 6 months? And that goal also impacts what your goals are around who you want to connect with. And also, who are you presenting yourself as to these various people? Okay, so once again, we want networking to feel real and to feel energizing in a way that fits who you are and once again, who your goals are. So, I'm going to go ahead and name why we feel so tired by networking, why introverts in particular feel so exhausted by networking. Well, especially, and I'm going to start on the in person side, which I think is honestly, to me at least, the more exhausting version of it. So you come back from an event, and I'm saying you in the proverbial you because I know I have done this. I'll come back from an event and I'm both wired and wiped at the same time. I'm both energized and exhausted. A lot of times this comes from I had to extend myself beyond my normal social capabilities. And then I come back and usually I'm glad I went, not always, but usually I'm glad I went. And then I feel so drained and exhausted because once again, I had to put on that face. I had to be extra cheerful. I had to be extra outgoing. And once again, this is masking for introverts, which I don't recommend you do, especially for an extended period of time. But of course, all of us have to do a little bit of it, especially when we get out into crowded spaces. So, what we want to do is we want to think about how we can land our credibility softly. How can we cleanly and succinctly talk about the areas in which we are experts? How can we have a good story that we bring to the table? So, when I do this also exercise in person, and I want you to also think about this too, is how can you introduce yourself in under 20 words? Now, the true exercise I give people is how can you introduce yourself in under 10 words? And this always starts with the who, the what, and the why. So, who are you? What are you focused on? And because we are focused here, we're here on LinkedIn, we're going to focus on career and work. So, what are you doing or what would you like to do in 6 months? But most importantly, and people always forget this part, the why, the differentiator. What is your POV? Why are you important in the room? And this is something that I do myself, which is I like to give myself a deadline, a time. So right now we are once again talking about introvert networking and what is that drain feeling that we feel. I like to set a timer for anywhere from 30 minutes to 45 minutes if the event is an hour to 2 hours. And I like to say, I commit to being in this room and being present for this amount of time. And when that timer goes off, I give myself permission to leave. Now, of course, I also host events. And when you host events, you don't unfortunately have permission to leave halfway through the event. But this is for events that I attend. I set a timer. I say I give myself permission to leave, but I also give myself permission to stay. So if I'm at an event and I set a timer for 30 minutes and I am enjoying myself or I'm not super drained after 30 minutes, then I stay past that 30 minutes for another 15 to 20 minutes. I'll extend that timer for a little bit of extra time. Okay, so, and I see Shelby has a great question. As an extrovert working with introverts, any tips for helping them network easier? I find myself throwing my introverts into conversation later, think, oops, that may have been uncomfortable with them. This is why introverts always need an extrovert partner. So sometimes, and this is Shelby, not the answer you wanted, sometimes you are absolutely helping. This is so helpful to do for introverts when an extrovert gives you that warm introduction, when they help you get into a space so you don't have to do that first opening, that first cracking open that conversation. I think about like cracking open a walnut. You don't have to do that first break, right? But I also want to throw out that, of course, sometimes introverts do want to just be unperceived. I know there's so many times when I'm at an event and I don't want to be perceived at all. That doesn't mean that it wouldn't be better if I was perceived. So, both the answer to your question is both yes and no. I think what is helpful is what I'll do with my extrovert friends is once again, I'll do a check in with my extrovert folks if I go to an event and I'll say, here's my goal, right? Here's my goal. I want to meet someone from X brand, or I want to find a new video editor, right? So those are two concrete goals. So then my extrovert friend that I'm partnered with knows what those goals are. So if we are talking to then a videographer, they can say, got it. I want to introduce Goldie to this person and say they're looking for a new video editor because this aligns with one of Goldie's goals. So, once again, having goals that are bigger and broader in scale. So, having that 6 month level goal, but also having a very niche down goal. So, for every physical event that you attend, have a goal. Now, this doesn't need to be a big goal. This might be a floating goal. This honestly usually is a in the moment. I have this hyper specific particular goal, but knowing what these two goals are at any point in time when you go into an event also, I think, makes the event less exhausting because you have a little bit of a target. You have a reason to be there. You have also something that you can talk about and that you can ask for because so often, and I find that introverts often are not so great at this too, we don't always ask for what we need. So having an immediate goal for an event means if I need a new video editor, I can ask at that event everyone that I meet, do you know a good video editor? And therefore, I get closer to my goal. And also, it gives me something to talk about. I know one of the really tiring things is not always knowing, or I'm an introvert with social anxiety, with anxiety in general. So I don't always know where to lead the conversation. I don't always know what to say next. So having those little bits of goals in my brain before an event is so helpful because then it gives me something to focus on, something to go to next. Okay, so here's some mistakes with networking that quietly costs you energy. I'm going to go back to once again something that I talked about earlier, which is treating it like a numbers game. So definitely, if you are treating all of networking like you need to get 100 contacts if you are in a room of 100 people, that means that you are never focusing and never deeply connecting with anyone in the room. And I think, once again, what introverts are so good at is connecting deeply. So instead of thinking how many, right? Instead of thinking quantity, think quality. Now, I give a ridiculously low number of people to connect to when people ask me how many people should I connect to at, say, a conference or a big meeting or a retreat, and that is two. If you can connect with two people, that's one, two people at an event or a meeting, that's going to be honestly at many points more helpful than connecting with 50 people. I think being someone that is visible and also connecting deeply with one or two people is so, so, so helpful. And I see Ellen dropped in a great message. I want to do events for introvert people, lots of meditations prior to actual networking. So I'll say this is so funny. This is a great time to mention my book, but not for the reason that you might think. So I have this book out, Personal Branding for Introverts. Check it out if you are an introvert and you're also interested in personal branding. And the reason why I bring up this book is one of the publishers that we did not go with for this particular book, they suggested for our marketing plan that we do a massive conference. right, for introverts. We do a massive, loud, energetic in-person conference for introverts. And I think that there is a way to do a successful introvert conference, absolutely, that is quieter and is more thoughtful and has lots of time for one-on-one time. But what they were describing sounded quite like an introvert nightmare. So we eventually did not, my team and I did not go with that publisher for this book because of that reason. Okay, so I see another great question. What do you do if you walk up to a group and everyone is already talking? So this is the worst feeling, right? When you go up to a group and everyone is already talking and you think, how do I insert myself into group? So instead of saying, how do I insert myself into the group, say, how do I welcome myself into a group, right? Because when you say insert, it becomes this, and I've done this before because I'm not always the least awkward person in the room. But I've done the thing where I'm like, do this, right? Where you do physically this motion and you try to insert yourself. I think the best way is to always say, how can you open it up, right? How do you open up a group to you? And one of the ways to do that is to simply stand between, and this is a physical thing you can do, is if here is person A and person B who are kind of in the side of the group that you want to enter in, is to stand right in between person A and person B, not behind one of them because that can be creepy. You stand in between person A and person B and you say, "Hi, do you mind if I join?" Right? Without doing this motion, this diving into the ocean motion, without doing the what can be sometimes awkward tapping on the shoulder motion. I like to do just a simple hand wave and just say, "Hi, do you mind if I join?" And I say it a little louder than conversational level, right? I don't shout. I just say it a little louder and a little more confident. So, hi, do you mind if I join? And it's a comfortable introduction. It's a comfortable little mini thing that I say. So it's not that I don't talk for a long period of time. I don't babble. I just say, hi, can I join? And 9 times out of 10, people will say, absolutely, you can join, right? And I think that it is very helpful to have that moment where you just stop and jump in. So hopefully that's helpful. That's one way that you can join in. Okay, so let's get back into mistakes that make you exhausted. So, one, staying until the very last person leaves. I have made this mistake before where I felt like I want to get a gold star in networking. And so I stay until the very last person leaves. I stay and help the host out, which sometimes I do because I am friends or close colleagues with the host, which is different. But in those cases where I'm not, I realize I almost never stay until the very end. I stay until I am no longer enjoying it. I think a lot about eating food, right? I stay until I enjoy the last bite. And I don't go over, right? In a buffet, I like to eat until I feel full and not try to overeat. Okay, so also I want you to start thinking about not having to force an extrovert playbook when you are at events like this. Okay, so let's get into instead of focusing on the mistakes that cost you energy, instead of focusing on tactical things for now, let's go back to, you know what, there's a great question that I did to actually talk about this event, which was, and I'm going to read out loud, tell me the hardest part of networking for you. Is it A, starting conversations? Is it B, keeping your energy up? Is it C, following up after? Um, and I think with a poll like this, and I'm going to be this person, Shelby, can you start a poll and have it say hardest part of networking for you? A, starting conversations, B, keeping your energy up, or C, following up after, um, if we can get that poll going. I think that when we are thinking through these three things, and I saw so many people voted on this, mostly because I think it is so hard. One of these areas is where we just get really exhausted. So feel free to type one, two, or three into chat. One, starting conversations. Two, keep your energy up. Three, following after. Which of these do you struggle with and do you find difficult? I want to see in the chat. Um, so I know that for me, it's C, following up after, right? Um, Sometimes A too. Uh, Also B. So for me, it can be all of those, right? But I struggle most with C. I meet a lot of great people. I'm not always great at following up afterwards. So let's go through each of these different things, and what can we do with each of these? Okay, so let's go through it. And I see we have a couple more chat things to focus on. So before I jump into those, I'm going to give you some time to vote. So drop one, two, or three in the chat. That's right. This is live voting, which is really fun and very cool. Okay, so uh, okay, great. And this actually is tied a little bit to what we're talking about right now. We have a great question. I had a few questions in mind. The first one I'd like to ask you is, what's your go-to polite exit when your social battery hits zero? Okay, I do one of two things. If I know, if I know the people who are hosting it, I make sure I go up to them and I say, hey, thank you so much for hosting and I have to go, right? Or I have another thing happening right after this. If I don't feel like I can say, I just want to go. Now, for me, I literally wrote a book on introverts. So now most people know that when I say I have to go, it's probably because my social battery is at zero. So a lot of times I will see the host, I will say, thank you so much, because they're the important person in the room. Or if I've met someone who is really interesting, I will also say, right, the one or two people who are interesting. If I meet somebody who's interesting, I will say, I will stop them and also say, hi, it was so lovely to chat with you. I'm heading out. Can we connect later? Right. If I didn't get their contact information, I'll say, can I get your contact information before I head out? And that's also a nice natural way to reconnect with the people right before you head out. And it's very, very helpful, I think, to do that. Okay, so, and then I'm going to jump into this next one, and then we're going to go into our poll. So once again, type in your poll. Is it one, two, or three? Drop those numbers into chat. So Ellen, I went to a virtual event the other time, and the way they did networking was so interesting. You had speed networking and you switch people, or you can opt out. Smaller group or one or two people. Yes, I think so many introverts feel that way about networking, which is we feel so much more comfortable with one or two conversations, with one or two people in a conversation, or with multiple people, five or less, in a conversation where we feel like everyone will go around in a circle and everyone will say, hi, my name is whatever. And I think if you are running events, this is the pro tip for if you are running networking events, especially with introverts, is to give them a format. Say, okay, we're going to do breakout groups in groups of 3 or 4. And in the breakout room, I'd like you to start with your name, your job role, and then, of course, some question. So maybe that question is, what are you interested in working on in the next quarter or the next 3 months? Same thing as quarter. So this is helpful for introverts to structure it this way, because then you have name, job, question. Now, if you are thrown into a networking group that does not have a specific format, I offered that to you as a way to also succinctly introduce yourself. Is name, current role, and if you're a job searcher, say the type of role that you would love to be working on. For example, innovation analyst. So I would say Goldie Chan, innovation analyst. And if I'm not currently working, which some of us are not. It's helpful to have the job title that we would like to have and introduce ourselves as that, right? And this is also when you introduce yourself, you don't need to go on a long tangent because, once again, the most memorable people are the people who have succinct stories. So, name what you're working on, and then maybe something very short, which is, oh, I've been part of this organization for several years now, or I'm volunteering on the blah, blah, blah committee, or I am interested in this, right? And keep it, once again, very, very, very short. Okay, so now we're going to jump in to our hardest part of networking for you. Okay, for the people who struggle with starting conversations, um, one way to start, which I think once again is so helpful. I already talked about that, how to insert yourself into a conversation, right? Hand up, just stand in between, not directly behind somebody, because when you stand directly behind somebody, once again, that can feel, we've all felt that person that lurks, and that's so uncomfortable. So we don't want to be that person. So stand in between the two people and then introduce yourself like this. So always start with real curiosity instead of starting with, "Hi, I'm this," and then going on a long tangent about yourself. Start with, "Hi, I'm this," and start with a really good question. So, what is a good question that you could ask in this party, in this conference, in this room? Now, for introverts out there, what is helpful is preparing these questions beforehand. So, once again, preparation makes everything so much less scary. Can you prepare your introduction, how you introduce yourself? So, hi, my name is this, I'm this, and then a quick question for the group, right? Or a quick, interesting note about yourself. I want you to practice saying these things out loud. Now, some people would say practice recording yourself saying these things. I know that not everyone feels comfortable on camera, so we don't always have to focus on recording ourselves. But what we are going to focus on is literally just saying the words out loud. So if it's helpful, and I have notes on this, so I'm literally removing the top one on it. I'll write things on, literally, I always have these on my desk or on my person. I have post-it notes, or I have note cards, or I have a little notebook. And for all of us out there, I'm sure all of us have our phones now. So make a note, write a little script, and practice saying it out loud. In fact, I would say, if you feel uncomfortable introducing yourself, practice saying it out loud at least 20 times before the event. Once again, you don't necessarily need to record yourself doing this, right? It's not a judgment. What we're doing is we're just getting comfortable with saying things. Okay, so this is honestly what I do, and it's maybe for the better, maybe for not for the better. If you are at a place that has the food, stand near the food. I was recently at a conference and I was in the VIP lounge. And I was not doing this even on purpose, but I was by the food because I was getting some tea, and I noticed like a couple other folks were coughing. And so I just started a conversation with somebody who was also queuing up to get some tea and coffee, and just saying, "Oh my gosh, I think we're in the middle of cold season." And then we started a conversation in this VIP area by the beverage cart, basically. So it is a slightly easier move to comment on food or drinks or coffee, especially coffee, because I feel like the easiest thing to do there is just be like, "I'm so tired." And especially if I spot another introvert getting coffee, I will say that. Okay, so that is one other thing that you can do, and it is all about genuine exchanges. So I think what also drains introverts is when we have to have these conversations that feel like a marathon conversation. It feels so fake. It feels so much like one person is trying to impress the other person, is trying to impress the other person. I like to connect on a deeper level when I talk to people. I like to have a level of warmth in a conversation. So if you find that during the day of conversations that you do not have a single moment where you're having a truly warm conversation with someone interesting, I think it's helpful to stop and then reassess who you are trying to talk to, right? Because I think we've all been there. One good conversation will keep you going. Now, I'm going to take a break before I address the keeping your energy up crowd and take a look at the comments again and questions. And once again, drop your questions in chat. This is fully live, so I'm going to keep asking and or asking. I'm also need to drink more of my coffee. I'm going to keep answering your questions live. Okay. So, question: how to find the right people to network with, and what can be the first message to send them while searching for a job? Okay, great question. Now, this is for, I'm assuming, online and probably for LinkedIn. So, this is a matter of goals. So, once again, if you are in the job seeking mode right now, it's helpful to think, what job roles am I looking for? And who can help me get those job roles? So usually that's two types of people. One is hiring managers and recruiters, and these are the people who are simply in charge of bringing on everyone at a company for a specific type of role. So that might be one group of people that you're speaking to. Now, the other group of people that you might be speaking to is people who are 1 to 2 to 3 levels above the role that you want. And I want you to start thinking about that too. If you're in the universe to look for a new role, or you're simply in the universe to find a new mentor, etc., who is 1 to 2 to 3 levels above the role that you want? Because they will feel less threatened, especially if they're 3 levels above the role that you want, to be able to intro you for a specific role. And what can be the first message to send them while searching for a job? Okay, so this is where it gets a little tricky because it really depends on what you are looking for, what specific role you're looking for, and then also it depends on, of course, who you're reaching out to. For, I would say, the HR and recruiter category of people in this universe, it is helpful to talk about, hi, I'm looking for, and just explicitly say the job role you're looking for. I'm looking for X role at X company. Um, and I love to speak more, right? I like to speak more. Keep it very short and simple. But here is where you can say explicitly, I'm looking for this. Now, on the other side of the table, you have being able to say, when you have speaking to people who are, I would say, 1 level, 2 level, 3 levels above what you're looking for, these people, you're going to start with a conversation opener instead. So you're going to say, hi, I'm blah. And I noticed that you're blah, blah. I love to speak more and get career advice or learn more about your career journey. And this opens it up as a conversation. You're not doing a hard ask. So hopefully that's helpful. Once again, one side you're going to ask just concretely for what you want. And once again, keep everything short. Do not do paragraphs. Just don't. Keep it short and open a conversation, right? And one other thing that you can always do is are you the right person to speak with? Would you know who I may speak with, right? Keep things polite and open and easy. Okay, so let's jump back to the keeping the energy crowd in our poll. So if you struggle with keeping your energy up, I want you to pace the event like it's a marathon. So marathon folks who run marathons, there's so many different ways to run a marathon, but most people who run a marathon do not run fast all the way through, right? There are periods where they slow down, take their time. They literally stop for water breaks, which is another great thing to remind you, which is if you are exhausted a lot of times, especially at in-person events, I want you to start thinking, am I also hydrating well? And are you hydrating well during the day? Um, so definitely make sure that you are keeping your energy up like that. And then once again, keep a realistic target, 2 good conversations, 2 good people to meet with, and you have permission to leave once you've hit this target. So if you are an event that is 6 hours long and after 2 hours you've met 2 of the right people, you have my personal permission to leave the event. You can leave the event. Now, if you want to say, I'm going to leave the event, go have lunch, decide during lunch if I have energy to come back and then come back again, great. But I give you permission to, at the very least, take a real 1 hour break if you've hit your goal. Also, and I saw a couple of folks talking about recharging, ways to recharge. Yes. So let's talk about a couple of ways to recharge when you're at a live event, or even when you're, say, doing a day of remote events, right? Virtual events, virtual meetings. One thing that is great, I saw meditation is one way that's really good. Some people recharge through reading, say, a few pages in a book. What we want to do is we want to get offline. We want to get off camera. We want to get off our phones. We want to also get, if we're in person, off speaking to other people. So if you are in an in-person event, I always give this exercise, which is take 10 minutes, go outside, and for 2 minutes out of that 10 minutes, do not talk to a single soul. Do not look at your phone. Just breathe and just try to reset your brain, right? Give your brain a chance to reset. Also, eat something, right? Eat something, drink something. Make sure that you are well hydrated. It's going to be so helpful. Now, if you are also doing something, once again, like a full day remote thing that is all virtual, make sure that you do take time where you are going and giving yourself a break to have a snack, to be off camera a little bit, to go and rest for a little bit so you're not just on the entire time. And when there are breaks in between sessions, actually take those breaks, right? Don't always scramble to network. Take the break and take that break in a different room if you can, a different space if you can, step outside. Okay, so I think we have a couple more questions. So I'm going to jump to Brian's question. I grew up in West Michigan, nice, where nobody wants to offend anybody by leaving, and then add on top of that the introversion battery concern, and I'm leaving way after I'm extremely full from the buffet. Now, I will say this, as a child of immigrants, I also was told to eat as much as I can at the buffet and take as much as I can from the buffet. You never want to leave anything on the table. So I absolutely understand this. Now, I want to say though that you are getting your money's worth. I think this is one thing that we talk about when people go eat at literally a buffets. People always talk about, am I getting my money's worth, right? Am I eating the crab legs versus, apologies to the vegetarians out there, versus only eating the soup and salad. Now, think about networking the same way. If you are stuffing yourself so full that you feel terrible the next day and you cannot work for 2, 3 days straight, what is the point, right? It is once again so helpful to think about, what are my real goals? And what are one or two types of people that if I met them, that would reach my goals? So maybe you are a consultant and those one or two people are new clients, but they should be even more niche down than that, right? They should be, what kind of clients do I want to meet? Now, maybe you're a job seeker. So maybe for you, your one or two people is, one, I want to meet somebody who works in HR or is head of people, etc., at a certain large company. And I really want to work at that company. So maybe the goals are someone who literally works at that company, and the other goal is someone from HR directly at that company. So I want you to think once again through those goals. And now I know I am a recovering people pleaser. I am always that person. I will also stay late when I usually run sessions, unless I have something right after that. I am staying late answering questions like 10, 20, 15 minutes after every session. I think that what is helpful is I give myself timelines, right? I give myself a deadline. So just like I said before, is if you go to an event and it's an hour long, say that you will be at the event for 45 minutes. Set that timer on your phone. And instead of feeling bad or guilty or that you're being mean by leaving early, just know that you are giving your best self for those 45 minutes. And I think you'll find that if you say are at a 1 hour event for 30 minutes or 45 minutes, that you may have FOMO, fear of missing out, if you leave early, but you will also feel better. You'll leave with a bit more energy. And also, I don't know if this is always true, but I know that at some of the events that I attend, if you leave a little bit early, you become that person that is perceived as a little bit busy, so you have other things to do, right? So it's helpful to leave always a little bit early. So if you don't want to leave though, 45 minutes before the event ends and say you're at an event that's 2 hours, give yourself always a 15 to 20-minute breather room. So always leave a little bit early. And for you, that might mean if you're an event from 6 to 8 p.m., set an alarm for 7:35 p.m. and just say at 7:35, I'm going to literally make sure that I make my way across the room, say thank you to the hosts or guests or interesting people I met, and I'm going to leave by 7:40. So always give yourself either a timer for the duration or a timer for leaving. And once again, this is so you give yourself a little bit of you time back. It just makes events a lot less stressful. Okay, so now let's go to the last thing that we talked about in this poll, which is the following up crowd. Now, I'm going to hopefully redeem myself from my own villain era of not being great at follow-ups. And this is where you need to build a system. And this is what I'm personally starting to do myself is if you are not great at the follow-up, you need a system. Now, whether that is writing into literally an Excel doc, people that you met, their names, an interesting fact about them, their email, and then if you should follow up, or I don't even have it right here in front of me. I have and this is going to sound hilarious, a paper notebook where I write people's names. And I write, I need to follow up on XYZ, and then I'll give myself a deadline. So I'll say by the end of today, I need to follow up with these two or three people about this. And then I also tell myself, I remind myself what I need to follow up with them. And this is also why I try not to connect with 50 million people at a conference, because when you have to follow up with less than 5 people, those people also become more memorable. It becomes so much easier to remember why you need to follow up with someone. So I recently met someone at an event, and now I realize I can't talk about this at all because this is very much a secret thing that I'm working on. So I will just say that I remember that I need to follow up with them right away after this major event. And so I wrote down a note to myself and I said, need to follow up with XYZ person about XYZ project, right? And they got referred to me through our mutual, who is this person. So I remember to nudge this person to send that intro email so then we could connect. And we connected literally 4 days later. So just always remember to build a system out that is helpful for you to remember to connect. And also send a short personal note that is helpful. So one fun fact that I like to share with a lot of people is that I'm an Archie comics writer. Yay! So this is the fun fact that this particular person really enjoyed. So when I reached back out to them, I said, "Hi, if you remember me, I'm an Archie comics writer. I also do this, which is what you're interested in talking to me about. Let's set up a call, right? So keep it friendly, keep it conversational, keep it a fact that you remember about them. So if they talked about having a boat that they take out on Lake Michigan, make sure that you mention that too. So it's all about fun, short, memorable facts too. Okay, so let's keep going. And once again, nurtured relationships instead of transactional relationships always work better. So it's all about how are you building real conversations with people? How are you making real connections with people? Okay, so let's talk about recovering from big events or recovering from something that you know will be tiring. For some of us, it's not even events. Some of us, it's we are leading a meeting and the next day we are going to be so exhausted. try to build in a buffer day the day after where you're doing less talking, where you're doing less of this, less engaging with other people. Try to always build that in for the next day so you will feel less exhausted. Now, I'm going to jump back into some questions and then I'm going to kind of end it out. But once again, if you have questions that you want to ask them live right now. Drop them into chat. Okay, so I'm going to jump all the way to a tool that said, what is the biggest lie people believe about introverts? So I personally believe that the biggest lie that people have around introverts is that there are no loud introverts. Something I talked about with my friend Christo, is that there are 100% loud introverts. Loud introverts exist when we are passionate and excited and interested in what we're talking about, right? Which is why people are so shocked when I say I'm an introvert who keynotes and creates, because I am so interested and excited about this topic. So it's easy for me to talk about this, right? It's easy for me to share about this subject. It's easy for me to be in this moment a loud introvert. I think that's such a misconception that all introverts are quiet, and that will never also want to be leaders. Another misconception. I think that introverts make fantastic leaders. Why? Because introverts are great listeners. Introverts are great at processing information, assessing that information, and then making good judgment calls based on that information, right? I think that is for sure an introvert superpower, is being able to think through a lot of questions that you have. Yes, 1,000% are they assumed introverts are just shy. Yeah, that is another misconception, is that introverts are not always shy, right? Introverts can be lost in their own thoughts. And that's why they don't want to speak up in a certain situation. Or I'll be honest, sometimes as an introvert, I just don't want to talk. I don't want to contribute. And it's not being shy, it's just being someone that doesn't either think that I want to contribute to the conversation because I don't have anything to say, or that I don't want to get in the middle of a mess, right? I've certainly been in conversations that are loud and heated and contentious, and I don't want to necessarily get in the middle of that. Okay, so let's get back into this day. You know what? Let me say one other pro tip I want to say is, if you can batch your days when you are on, right? For me as a content creator, that might mean that if I have filming days, actually today is a filming day for me. So literally right after this recorded session, I'm going to have a very early lunch for me, and then I'm going to go film for 4 hours. So today is a long day where it is just an on-camera day for me, and I know that going into today. So tomorrow is not that day, right? Tomorrow is a rest day for me. Once again, I want to emphasize that some of the best opportunities come from a few real relationships. And the more that you can have sustainable visibility, the better for introverts, right? So you want to treat it like this. You want to think start, sustain, follow up. That's your 3 steps, is start, sustain, follow up. But keep all of these steps real and genuine. Okay, so let's jump into a couple more of these questions. Okay, so LinkedIn, I can't see who this actually is, so I apologize, but it's quite challenging trying to keep my energy up while trying to do a good job, both actively listening and also figuring out what to ask or say to the other person. Whew, yeah, this is so tough. And this is why I try not to do group conversations when I go to big conferences or when I'm at very busy events. What I try to do is do one on one conversations, because I find that at least is so much easier for me to keep up, because then I'm only active listening to one person and I'm only then having to figure out what to say to that one person. I also, when I'm in conversations, I'm really present. So one thing that I don't try to do is wait till they're done speaking and then speak. I am really listening to them talking, and then I'm responding based off what they actually said, right? I'm not trying to steer the conversation in a certain direction. I'm going with the flow of the conversation, and I'm also asking questions about what they just said too. You'd be surprised at how much people enjoy conversation where they are asked questions because so many times we, especially at events, we treat conversations as times to steamroller, just like roll right over, monster truck roller over other people. So it's helpful to ask questions. It is helpful to have a conversation with just one person. Now, it's also, once again, helpful to have a single goal for any conference because once you have that single goal, then in the conversation, you will know that you will eventually want to ask or talk about that particular goal. And you can even frame it as, what is one thing that you're looking to solve? What is one problem that you're looking to solve? Or what is one area that you are trying to improve in, or you're curious about? What is one area that you're curious about is another great question. Okay. So we have so many other questions in here. I'm going to jump into a couple more of them. My next question is, uh how do you keep in touch with new connections without feeling that you're bothering them? So keep it fresh, keep it short, keep it personal. So the first thing that I do is, once again, if I've just met somebody, I'll send a message the next day, or honest, I'm being so honest here. 2 days or 3 days later, just because I am very busy, I will personally send that message, so it doesn't come from my team, it comes from me, Goldie. I will send a message and keep it short and succinct and just say, "Hey," and also, this is helpful for me later. I'll say, "Hi, blah. It was great to meet at blah, where we talked about blah," right? This is just so I remember actually where we met later in the conversation. I can scroll back up to the top of that conversation and be like, "Oh, right. We met at Content Marketing World in Denver, Colorado," or we met at Salesforce in Chicago, or we met in Paris at Vivatech, right? So it's just helpful for me. I like to say the place, either the physical city or the physical event that we met. Now, if we met virtually, then I'll say the name of the virtual event that we met at. And then how do we stop from bothering them? So, what I don't do is, if they don't immediately respond to that message, I do not follow up immediately the same day, for sure. If it's somebody that I want to connect with, I'll wait half a week and I will follow up with them the following week and say, "It was so good to chat. I just wanted to see if you wanted to have another conversation. You wanted to chat more about XYZ." And I want to give them a concrete thing that we'll be talking about, right? So, not just, are we going to chat further, but let's chat about this, right? And it should be something that they will be excited to chat about because we talked about why they are excited to talk about that. So hopefully that's helpful. That's both timing and also kind of framing of what we want to say. Okay, so next one, Brian, what do you do when you give yourself the buffer to leave early? Someone you want to think is deep in conversation, but you want them to remember you. I hate standing there like Cuber and then interrupting. I will say this: I used to not interrupt. Now I will interrupt. And I just don't stand there like a creeper. So I eliminate one of those things. I will stand, not hopefully behind the person, but a little bit. Once again, we always want to shift to the left or right. I'll shift a little bit to the left or right of the person, and I will say their name, right? Which is, I find, the least creepy way of saying it. So I will stand slightly to the right or left of them, and I will say, "Hi, Laura." "Hi, Laura. Wanted to let you know that I'm heading out and it would be wonderful if we connect. Sorry for interrupting," or "apologies for interrupting," or uh, "thank you for letting me say goodbye." If you don't want to be a person that says sorry, right, you can say thank you to the other person for letting you have the moment. And usually, if you say something like, "apologies for interrupting," the other person, and I make direct eye contact with the other person they're in conversation with when I say that. Usually the other person is very forgiving and they're like, "Oh no, of course, totally understand," right? Because they're usually there for the same reason, or they already know that person. So then I get the contact information very quickly. We exchange either LinkedIn, email, phone, whatever, what, Instagram, whatever way of communicating that seems like the best fit. And then I I say thank you, and then I exit, right? I give them back the conversation and then I exit. So instead of standing there creepily, I just immediately walk up and say, hi, blah, right? And I start with their name. Okay, I will go next to Hunter. What are your favorite recovery techniques? Oh my gosh. So like I said, today is literally a film day for me. I'm on this we're seeing this in action. I'm doing this live session right now, and then I will be, like I said, filming for a few hours afterwards. And because I'm filming for a few hours afterwards, that means tomorrow is a recovery day for me. So I build in recovery days. And if I don't have recovery days, I build in chunks of recovery time where I have anywhere from 2 to 4 hours where I do in the middle of the day. So it's important to me to be not during sleep hours because those are literally your sleep hours, but during the day that I have time when I'm not working. One thing that I've started doing again personally myself is I play video games. So I've been playing a lot of Professor Layton. But I build in recovery time. So my favorite recovery technique is to build in recovery time the next day. Even if it's not full day, I'll take at least 2 hours during the day. That's recovery time. And once again, that's not lunch or dinner. That's actual days, hours in the day. So the other thing that I like to do is I love nature. So if I can, I love to be in a place that either is trees or ocean. I try to be out in nature, taking walks, trying to be outside. It's very hot right now where I am in Los Angeles, so it's a little bit less pleasant to do that. But I like to be outside in the shade and just breathing some fresh air. That to me is also recovery time. I also like to set aside days. Once again, this is of course my schedule because I'm not in a 9 to 5. But when I was in a 9 to 5, I would do this on the weekend. I like to send friend days, right? So I have entire days where I will go and do an activity. An event I recently did, and I don't have it right here, is I went and did ring making with one of my friends. We went and built silver rings from scratch, and we took a few hours out of the day. We had a delightful coffee, made some rings, ate a lunch, and that was a almost full day of non-work activities. So I love to do physical activities that are offline is wonderful way to recover. And I also saw that somebody wrote about meditation. So once again, meditation is another great thing to do. So think about that. Those are all different ways to recover. Now, as we have just a few more minutes left, and I think, Shelby, I have another QR code that's also for a one-page PDF sheet that folks can get. Here is your free worksheet. So feel free to scan this and get a free personal brand one-page sheet that you can use to start thinking about your personal brand. Now, I know that we have literally 1 minute left in our session. So thank you everybody for joining in. I hope that this is helpful. And I hope that I answered a lot of your questions. In fact, we are going to do another one of these sessions to round it out. Everything. We're going to round out everything in August and do another session. So thank you so much to everybody who joined in. And once again, the 3 lanes are start a conversation, sustain a conversation, follow up, and be sure to recover in a way that feels real and feels genuine. And whenever you are talking to folks, always start from a place of curiosity. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to give you your last 10 seconds back for this event. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and I hope to see you in August's event. Bye.